I started my career back in 1997 at Ernst & Young. And during that time, there was this hype that was a brewing. It was called the internet and e-commerce. And everybody was talking about and racing towards it. And if you take e-commerce and you change it today with AI, that's really the buzz that I'm feeling again in boardrooms. People are really trying to figure out, how do we capitalize on this? And boards and companies have to be very careful and plan strategically in how they're going to adopt AI so they don't turn into a pets.com. As we know that story, there's Chewy. And so as you look at this, and as I've talked to companies, boards really have to also take into account the cultural shift of their employees. So AI to companies is a huge disruptor in a positive way. To employees, it's a huge disruptor in a negative way. AI is a thinking apparatus. The internet was a vehicle for communication, completely different. So as we look at rolling out strategies and we look at adoption and what we're going to do, we have to keep in mind that most of the employees are fearful of AI because they might lose their job. And UPS did this last year. Tens of thousands of jobs got laid off. This year, 10,000 more over the future of initiatives, AI automation. So it's real. And so as we move forward with this conversation today, it's really engaging to figure out, how do we wrestle with those two things that are so prominent in the business community and could just completely disrupt industries, but keep in mind the human element to AI.
Ken, I think you're absolutely right. Aside from that story making me feel old, because I remember 1997 and the internet too, you hit the nail on the head, and it goes in perfect to what we're going to talk about today. So welcome everyone to another edition of the Zero Trust Issues podcast. I'm your co-host, Tony Pietrocola. Joining me
Joe
as
Marquette.
always.
Happy to be here.
Joe, good to see you. We got a great, we have a great guest, and how we start all of our podcast is with an introduction of that great guest who told us that fantastic story. So Ken Stasiak is a veteran cybersecurity leader, advisor, and former founder of Secure State. It's a great name for that company. He helped bridge the gap between cybersecurity and business strategy. After leading Secure State's sale to RSM, Ken led the $62 million in revenue, security, and risk practice for RSM. So with decades of experience guiding organizations and boards through very complex cyber risk decisions, Ken brings a unique perspective on how emerging technologies like AI will reshape security operations, leadership oversight, and organizational risk. Ken, we're thrilled to have you.
Woo!
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're looking forward to catching up on this. And I think your story of leading in was perfect, right? Everybody talks about AI, both good, bad, but that human element is so critical. And as we're going to talk today about cybersecurity, security ops, you mentioned the boardroom. These things are so important because I don't think everybody's taking all these into consideration.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think as you look at, AI, AI has infinite amount of answers that it'll give you. The competitive advantage and where we're really at today is, do you know the question to ask it? And I think as we lean into that cognitive thinking is going to be critical. And as you look at security operations and the alerts that it comes in and the bots that you have and the agents, and you could say, give me the IP address of all that it's logged into for all the endpoints and give me this, this, and this, and it can compile that data within seconds. The question is, do we know the question to ask it after that? Do we know what the next follow-up is? And I think that's really where the human element is really going to be shaping a lot of the security operations centers and the technology around AI.
It's a great point. The human element, I think, often gets lost in the conversation, and you make an excellent point about that. And how do you bridge the element of asking that question, or have you seen whether you're like, okay, even if you train it, are people afraid to ask the next question? You know, is this thing going to get away from people? And how do you build that culture of just like, you got to own it. You got to keep feeding it and driving towards better answers. I mean, is there a mandate? Is there a cultural way to approach this that you think is, or you've seen that works well?
Yeah, I think it stems from the top of the organization down into using it as initiatives, innovation, and having a culture where it's okay to fail. And we have built cultures where it's not okay to fail. I'm afraid of asking that wrong question, or I'm afraid of stepping into it. And AI is a platform where you don't want to be afraid. You want to lean in. You want to ask those questions. And so we have to be okay as leaders to say we messed up or we stepped on something that probably didn't make a lot of sense for the organization. But we're okay with that because we are learning and we are evolving. And I think if we do that, I think people will get excited about asking that next question with AI.
It's a great point. And I was listening to a podcast this past week. We all listen to a bazillion podcasts, and it was with Kevin Mandiant, right? So obviously we all know Kevin Mandiant and what he's done for cybersecurity. And he said a couple of interesting things, and I'd like to get your perspective on it. Point one was really interesting, talking about prompts and questions is, you can continue to ask AI whatever you want to ask it, and it'll answer it the way you want it to answer, right? So you can kind of lead AI, kind of like you can lead, people in your own life and kind of manipulate them. But the second thing he said that was really profound was, when he built Mandiant and then FireEye and building this new company he's building, he's like, I don't need a bazillion people. I need really good AI with the right amount of people, and those two things working together is going to be the perfect security company moving forward. So the thing I would throw out to you, Ken, as you think about 1997 and what you built from cyber with really smart people, because I know some of those people, very smart people, and now as you see technology and AI taking off, when you think about security teams, where's that impact that is going to make a huge difference? And then where do you see the hype that really might never really come to the realities that we're seeing?
Yeah, and I think he brings up a couple good points. The first one is we all have biases that we bring into our daily life. So that one is confirmation bias. And it is something you really have to be mindful of as you're using AI. I could ask it questions because I want to know the answer that I expect it to give me. And as analysts, and as we start to look at that could be a little misleading, especially if we're looking at how do we improve our processes and how are we responding to incidents. So we almost have to remove that a little bit from our cognitive bias and go in with open-minded questions that aren't driving towards a conclusion. And I mean, when I did RevOps, I will tell you, I spent years doing pivot tables and pulling data and building models and simulations and coming up with what if scenarios. And those things can be done now within minutes. And so really the advantage is now, how do I think about that? How do I pull those levers now? How do I get an organization to understand the decisions around that? And that cognitive thinking is so exciting. It's something that really has taken us to a whole new enlightenment stage of learning. And so Kevin's right. You got to find people that are really inquisitive about technology and want to get in and ask good questions, but use it as a framework to make better and quicker decisions in that model. And I think the SOC is just fall right into line with everything you guys have seen and what you've seen in the industry as well.
You make a great point. And it's one question I wanted to ask, and that's, there are elements of a SOC, a high performance SOC, where the issues at hand are not being decided by or driven by questions of the analyst, for example. So as these tools evolve, from your perspective, where is AI truly making a difference now at a SOC level? Because it's not necessarily all the context that you described is absolutely correct. Whether or not, how do you drive forward? How do you push, lean, fail forward from an end user perspective? But sometimes they're just relying upon the tool. Right. Where's the tool now that much better than it used to be in your experience?
Well, I think you guys know, indicator of compromises, doing that initial triage, being able to correlate back, is stuff that now it does within seconds and at an astounding rate. So Joe, to your point, I mean, that's the stuff that I used to spend. And I mean, I know people that still get woken up in the middle of the night because they're getting alerts. And the ability to not only have the alerts, but have the contextual data around the alerts is just unbelievable. And as you know, organizations have thousands and thousands of endpoints, and indicated or compromises could span that. And the ability to pick that up and know that profile that quick and then be able to make decisions on it. I mean, that's where it's so exciting for AI, because we're not spending hours building pivot tables and spreadsheets anymore. Now we're analyzing what's next and being able to get that response within hours and days to sometimes minutes is crazy.
But here's the corollary to that. Where do the humans have to stay firmly in control from your perspective?
Yeah, exactly. Lockstep. So, Microsoft did a thing called branding, and they branded their product called Copilot. And it's exactly that. It's a Copilot. So, no organization's allowing the AIs just to autonomously go fly planes. There's a Copilot. They're next to the analyst as they go through, truly as a virtual analyst to them as they're walking through that, but asking that questions. Did you look at these endpoints? I saw this indicator of compromise. Did you correlate it back to this? Or I see this asset. How is it affected to this? Those questions you used to have to solve. Now you can ask them, but it goes back to my point number one. You have to, one, feel comfortable you could ask those questions. And two, you have to understand what the questions are to ask.
That makes perfect sense. Obviously, we agree with that mentality and endorse exactly what you're saying. I swear we've not told him anything that he needs to be filling in the blanks on here. As you look back at your experience, what you've seen, and the arc of technology and AI, particularly in cybersecurity and running a SOC, what I mean, let's break down what you just described a little bit better. Can you give anyone in our audience that's looking at managing a SOC, whether that's internally or outsourcing it, what's a healthy human and AI workflow look like at a high level from your perspective? What's the driving force, but in the blend that people want to try and balance out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is, I think most people hear AI, at least from my perspective, and they think it's faster and cheaper. And that's not always the case. And so we're not replacing human, behavior with AI in that regard. And so it is a combination of, there are aspects of AI that we're including that actually increase cost of products, because it does allow more enrichment of data from the analyst perspective. And I don't think a lot of people have gotten to that point yet. I still think they believe AI is an outsourcing model, the cheapest resource at the table, and we're just going to now go to how fast can we get to the bottom. And in essence, it's really catapulting organizations to think much differently than we have. So to your point, I think they're lockstep, but I think the mentality of people have to shift in the way that we think AI is in a business model.
So Ken, just yesterday, we did our, with our CTO, we did our 2026 product roadmap webinar, where we told our customers what we're going to be adding to our platform, all the great AI. And of course, before we got to saying this, a customer popped in with a question. And the question was this: what kind of guardrails are we putting in to make sure AI is right? We've all used AI, whether it's generative AI or automation, and we've seen it have potential problems, right? Wrong answers, changing of answers, whatever it might be, right? Different prompts can get you different things. So when it comes to cyber, where have you maybe seen some people over trusting it? And do you think more and more guardrails with cybersecurity firms are going to become something that is going to allow it to work the way, with a lot of confidence, the way that it should work? Or do you think it could actually spiral out of control?
Yeah. So as my analogy in the beginning of the story, it took us 10 years to wrestle the internet with cyber and privacy and compliance. And I think as we lean into that as our benchmark, we really should start looking at frameworks today, because it is expanding, at a super fast rate, as we all know. But to your point, one of the things that reminds me is in medical, it's cross-contamination. I think cross-contamination of data is probably one of our biggest risks in AI, as your client was asking you on that webinar. And that is where we're feeding information and it's learning, but it's also learning at all of the other clients or customers we have. And while that sounds like a great opportunity, it also could really leak sensitive information extremely quickly. And so we have to make sure that we have guardrails put up with how we're ingesting data, and how is it learning, and do we have siloed information that it can't really see, because that's the information that, when leaked, could really do damage to multiple organizations.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We also think that there is, you mentioned humans, and humans in the loop could be a great part of those guardrails. And we think that's a big advantage for critical thinking human beings to work with AI to make sure our clients have confidence in what they're saying. So let me just throw this part out to you then. Where do you maybe see firms that you're starting to work with underuse AI, and you look at it and say, guys, if you thought about it like this 2 + 2 could equal 5?
Yeah, I think last year was a big turning point. We had organizations that were saying, almost, if you used AI, it was looked down upon, and they didn't want people to be able to have their processes and their work done quicker, And so today, I think we're seeing a lot of that kind of dissipate. On the opposite end, we're starting to see adoptions and a grassroots effort of AI, and that only could akin it to third-party risk, where we just kept ingesting third parties into our environment to the point where we didn't even know where our data was. We didn't know who had access to it. And it's so easy to spin up, if you will, AI and go in and type and drop something in and have it analyzed for me. We don't realize the security ramifications that 10,000 employees doing that are going to lead vulnerable to an organization. So to your point, I think it's on both ends. I've seen it now flip, where it's the adoption and the grassroots and getting this into the environment is even at a scary rate versus having governance and controlling it.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned the word scary, let's ask this, and then Joe, feel free to take it. I just want to make sure I get this in. It's great. The technology's fantastic. Companies are being built around it. Trillions of dollars are being poured into it globally, not just in cyber, of course, but everywhere. But when you think about this new category of risk, if you're consulting an organization, I don't care if that organization's Fortune 500 or a mid-size org, but we tend to appeal to mid-size orgs in our podcast. Where do you think that biggest category of risk comes in, where boards and executives really need to understand, we need to use this, but this is the risk we need to make sure we mitigate?
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting. So I think there's 3 types of board members. The enlightenment board member, who is using AI, as I kind of already said, to make better decisions, grab data, understand it. The dependent board member, who's using AI to make decisions for a board member. And then the board member who's just, I don't want to adopt it. It's not for me. I don't understand it. And to that point, I've seen board members take, AI output and throw it to other board members. And that's dangerous, number one. And number two, it shows that we're not really using it for critical thinking. So the risk to small businesses, mid-sized businesses, is the composition of the board really is going to drive whether they're pushing out governance and allowing an organization to embrace that enlightenment, or they're using it to kind of depend themselves on there, or they have board members that are just avoiding it. And all 3 of those, frankly, at the highest level, could be risks to the organization.
Interesting. So you're basically saying that you can have an overtrust scenario, you can have an undertrust scenario. And back to your previous point, we skipped the part in the middle where we kind of trust it, but we're not worried about it. We went from we don't trust it to we overtrust it. Is there one that creates more long-term damage?
Well, I think we all know overtrusting is probably the one that creates the longest term damage, right? I think that's where we're going to start to see inflections in regulatory compliance and really start to hammer down and lock down. But, we as organizations have the responsibility to do that today. not wait for the federal government like we normally do. And then a regulation comes out and we're like, oh my gosh, you threw this upon me. And it's like, well, if you would have just not done this, we wouldn't have to done that, right? And I think that's kind of that inflection point we are for organizations similar to yourself that take it very critical, put the controls in place, put the guardrails in, and want to be the leading provider. And if more and more organizations did that, I think long-term we'll be in a much safer place using AI.
Totally agree. So we always like to close these things with a little takeaway, one nugget that we can ensure that our audience is, going to remember. And if you, as a founder, as an advisor, a board level voice, have one piece of information or advice you want to give to, our audience out there, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the organizations that are going to win are the ones that haven't adopted AI the quickest. They're not the ones that put in the coolest AI tech or the coolest dashboards. It's going to be the ones that have figured out how to integrate AI into the human capital, into the human world. And I think the organizations that learn how to do that and lean into that are the ones that are going to look back in 5 years and 10 years and say, yeah, we absolutely captured this disruption and we used it in our advantage.
Fantastic. It's awesome. Tony, any follow-up on that one?
I don't. I think that sums it up perfectly. What about you? You want to throw a takeaway out?
No, not myself. When you get an answer like that, it's the last one. I mean, how am I going to add any color on that? No, I think I think you're spot on so many of these points, and we really do appreciate you sharing it. And we really do think that there's some great information that you've shared here today. So we again do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, Ken,
Well,
thanks
thank you,
for
guys.
joining. Yeah, we knew this would be a great conversation with your background. We thought this would be great. Appreciate you walking us into the podcast today with that story because it does frame things, I think, extraordinarily well. Internet and now AI. You're talking probably the two biggest inventions in the history of mankind. Maybe the wheels in there too, and the combustion.
Electricity.
Hey, who's counting?
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, that's pretty good too.
right.
That's good stuff.
We're going to need a longer podcast.
All right, everyone. Thanks. Yeah, exactly. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Zero Trust Issues podcast. For more information about AgileBlue, it's easy. You just check out agileblue.com. You can also find Ken on LinkedIn. He posts some fantastic takeaways. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for tuning in to Zero Trust Issues. Be sure to click follow so you never miss an episode. And visit AgileBlue.com to learn more about how AI-native cybersecurity can protect your business. The information shared in this podcast represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily reflect those of AgileBlue. This content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as professional cybersecurity, legal, or business advice. Always consult qualified professionals regarding your organization's specific needs or circumstances.